Okay, we are going to use this document to learn about the French Revolution, Olympe de Gouges, Declaration of Rights of Man, and Declaration of Rights of Woman and Female Citizen. Okay, so this happened during the French Revolution in 1789. The revolution was just starting, and the new government the revolutionary government made a declaration written down of Enlightenment ideals and rights of man and of the citizen. Now, it was indeterminate whether these rights applied to the colonies, slaves, or women. I mean, it specifically says men, and then later, though, it says all persons. So regardless, it wasn't specific, so there was questions from the colonies, freed people of color, women, whether it applied to them. So, and that was debatable. So Olympe de Gouges, which was a staunch abolitionist, she didn't like slavery, and she fought for women's rights, wrote 2 years later, 1791, the Declaration of Rights of Women. She took each article of the Declaration of Rights of Man and adjusted it so it fully included women and made sure that they were included in the rights. Now, there's a total of like 13 or 14 articles. These are just examples of. Okay, so let's go through a little bit, see how it works. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions may be found only upon the general good. Okay, see, so that says men. Olympe de Gouges writes, woman is born free and remains equal to man in rights. So that clears it up totally. Social distinctions can only be founded on the common service. Basically the same thing as common good. The aim of all political association is the preservation of natural and inalienable rights of man. That says man. These rights are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Olympe would alter that and say the aim of all political association is to preserve the natural and inalienable rights of women and man. These are the rights of liberty, ownership, safety, liberty, ownership, property, same thing, and above all, resistance to oppression. We should mention that these are both translations from the French. So, did she specifically say ownership versus property? Okay, so certain things we got to understand. Maybe the translations aren't exact, or maybe she changed some of the words because there was literally different meanings in the French words. Okay, so we don't know that, but we do know that she is definitely adding women's rights in addition to men's rights. Liberty consists in the freedoms to do everything in which injures no one. That's totally a John Locke idea. Hence, the exercise of natural rights of each man has no limit except those which assure to the other members of society the enjoyment of the same rights. These limits can only be determined by law. Okay, so everyone has rights as long as it doesn't injure anyone else, and your rights can only be limited by law. Liberty and justice lie in rendering everything which belongs to others as of right. Thus, the exercise of women's natural rights has no limit other than the perpetual tyranny of man's opposing them. These limits must be reinforced by the law of nature and reason. So, some of her Declaration of Rights of Women is not just reformatory, not just activist, but it also sends a message. Okay? So, she's sending a message that there was perpetual tyranny of man's oppressing women's rights. So she sends a message that men have oppressed women's rights in the past, and so it's educating her readers. Law is the expression of the general will. Every citizen has a right to participate personally or through his representative in its foundation. That's democracy, right? General will, majority rule, participate personally or through an elected representative. That's democracy. It must be the same for all, whether it protects or punishes. All citizens being equal in the eyes of the law are equally eligible to all dignities and to all public positions, occupations. Every citizen is equal under the law. See, it's indeterminate whether they're talking about men or women there. So Olympe is going to rewrite and say the law must be the expression of the general will. Okay, same thing. All citizens, female and male. So specifically saying this is what's intended. Equality should agree personally or through their representatives in the formation of the law, and it must be the same for all. All citizens being equal in its eyes. It must be equal to all honors, positions, public posts according to their abilities. That's going to come back with Napoleon on the merit system according to their abilities as opposed to nobility, as opposed to gender for Olympe, but Napoleon is going to be not promoting women's rights. But this is foreshadowing to Napoleon in his merit system, and with no other distinction other than those of virtue and talents. Okay, so inequality and equality, no discrimination based on anything. People should be getting their job and their positions through how good they are. And to finish it up, this was established in French law, the Declaration of Rights of Man. French women did go on to fight for women's rights, but it would be over 100 years, almost 150 before the French women got the right to vote. So Olympe was executed in the revolution, but it is very questionable whether she was executed because of her stance on women's rights. Her and her political party were not revolutionary enough, so she and basically her entire political party in the government was executed. So it's more likely that she just got caught up and everyone in her political party was executed because they were not revolutionary enough. They wanted to end the revolution. And remember, revolutions, unless it's founded on a desire not to kill, will always go farther and kill those who want to stop. And that's what happened to poor Olympe and her political party. The revolution ate its own as it progressed forward into its new vision for the future. Okay, let's answer some questions. This is a multiple choice questions from the Regents, New York State Regents exam. Which political philosophy is best supported by both documents? Okay, so after reading both, what in general do they have in common? The rule of law represents a social contract with the people. That is totally an Enlightenment ideal. These are Enlightenment declarations. The answer is 1, but let's continue. Tyranny encourages liberty and security. Okay, that would mean absolute rule encourages, helps along liberty and security. No, this is anti-king, anti-tyranny. So no. Separation of powers guarantees people fair treatment. Okay, I understand that Enlightenment ideas are separation of powers, but where in here is there anything about separation of power? We do have the rule of law and social contract, so it's 1 is better than 3. 3 is a possible true statement, although it's very general, but it's not supported by the documents. Oppression promotes the general will. Oppression helps. The general will is what people want. No. So the answer is number 1. Which event most directly influenced the writing of both documents? Well, if I know it's the rights of man and rights of woman, the answer's got to be Enlightenment or French Revolution. Let's see what it is. Iranian Revolution? Nope, that's 1970s, where the religion took over. Cuban Revolution? No, that's in the 1900s, where communism took over Cuba. French Revolution? Yes. Russian Revolution? No, that's in the early 1900s, where communism took over. So the answer is the French Revolution. Okay, let's go through the answers if we were to use these in our document questions. The first is historical circumstances. What historical circumstances led to these authors writing their declarations of man and woman? Remember, we're not summarizing the documents. It's what caused these documents to be created, what was going on at the time. And so, the French Revolution and Enlightenment led to these 2 documents. During the French Revolution, the revolutionaries wanted to write a new government document that talked about Enlightenment ideals. Then, Olympe de Gouges wrote one that called for the rights of women also. I can think of no geographic circumstances. If you had to, you could say that these were created in the population center. People were clustered in the capital of France, which is Paris. They're never going to ask geographic circumstances on this. Okay, for purpose, explain the purpose for which these documents were created. Explain means to go in depth as to why. Here is an example answer. Yours might be different. The purpose of these declarations was to put down citizens' rights in a government document. For example, life and property, and the law must be expressions of general will. These documents were to create new rules for society. So look what I did. I got the best purpose I could. I tried to figure it out. And then I did one example, a quick little quote. Don't do too long quotes, but just a little bit. And I pulled textual evidence from the document to back up my claim of what the purpose was. Right? The audience is the intended receivers of the documents. And so explain how the audience affected what the authors included or how the authors wrote it. For the audience answer, I say who the audience is, and then I say how, I explain how it affected the authors. The audience for these documents was the entire French citizens. As such, the document focuses almost entirely on the citizens and their rights and role in the government, such as rights, our liberty, property, security. I took a little textual evidence to support my claim or give an example of my claim. I said who the audience is, and I said how. I explained how that audience, I figured out a way of how the audience influenced the writers. Okay, point of view is the author's opinion on something. So, identify the author's opinion on law. We'll pick law. It could be natural rights or citizens. We'll say law. As of right now, we have only seen the state ask for and identify the point of view. If it said explain, our answer would be different. For right now, we are only looking to identify, to point out what the author's opinion on law is. And so, here is a fine answer. The author's point of view on law is that the law is the expression of the general will and is the same for all, and citizens are equal in the eyes of the law. And I could have put little quotes around that for the words that I took directly there. I could have done that. We have identified the author's opinion, point of view on law. Again, we're not sure how the state asks a bias or objective question, so we'll go with identify and explain, or just explain any bias seen in the document. Here is an answer that might work fine. There appears to be a bias towards men in the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Sometimes the document says, quote, all citizens, but other times it specifically says, quote, men are born, etc., etc. This seems to not talk about women, and thus would be biased. As a note, that might be how we use bias in our everyday life. It's not biased towards a claim. It's not necessarily one-sided in an argument, but we're reaching for bias here. We're trying to find something, so we're using our daily use of the word bias. Okay, finding a cause and an effect. If there is a cause and effect relationship between the referencing both documents. And note, we have to identify and explain a cause and effect relationship. We want to make sure we do both. The identify is what caused what, and the explanation is why. Okay, look how I structured it. The first sentence is identify the cause effect, and then I explain it. The writing of the Declaration of the Rights of Man caused Lampe de Gouges to write the Declaration of the Rights of Women. Then explain it. Why? The Declaration of the Rights of Man sometimes only included men. Textual evidence, men are born and remain free and equal. Thus, Lampe de Gouges wanted to write a declaration that included women. That's her motivation. That's why the cause and effect happened. Her desire to include women. For example, woman is born free and remains equal to man in rights. And I used textual evidence there. And just for good measure, I told my reader where I was getting that textual evidence, Doc 1 and 2. Okay, turning point. Identify a turning point in these documents and then explain the turning point. A turning point answer is worth 2 points, I believe, so we spend a little more time on it. A turning point. So first, we identify a turning point. A turning point in these documents is the writing down of rights that applies to all citizens. Okay, so that would be the turning point. The Declaration of the now we explain that, and we have to talk about each document. So here's the explanation. The Declaration of the Rights of Man was written during the French Revolution and extended rights such as liberty, property, security to men of France. Doc 1. The Declaration of Rights of Women was a document that wanted these same rights for French women. The exercise of women's natural rights had no limit. We just took a little quote that showed the rights for women. Document 2. This was one of the first times in France this had happened. So there we're explaining why it's a turning point. This was one of the first times that it had happened. Or you could say something that after these declarations, the French people tried for a very long time to get these rights. That would be another answer right there. So it was one of the first times it happens, or the French people, after seeing the declarations, kept trying to get these rights for many years. Right? For similarity or difference, pick one. Similar or different between these two documents. Just pick one. Identify what is similar or what is different, and then explain why you think it is. Okay, we're getting to the end, so you know what these should be. We've already written them 2 or 3 different times. Okay, identify the similarities. These documents are similar because they both contain writings about human rights and natural rights. Document 1 says blah, 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 pick out some rights. Document 2 includes blah, 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 pick out some rights, and then bring it all together by saying those both show rights and Enlightenment ideas and support individual rights in France. And there's your similarity or similarity. For your difference, okay, if we were going for a difference, I think you would immediately come to the conclusion one does not mention women and one does mention women. So identify the difference. These documents are different because one deals with the rights of man and the other deals with the rights of woman. That identifies it. Now explain it. Document 1 focuses on men having rights, give some textual evidence, blah, blah, blah. Document 2, make sure to include women in the rights, give textual evidence, blah, 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 with a little quote, couple words. And then bring it home with an explanation. Since one includes women and the other doesn't, they are significantly different in their scope. Good. Okay, to finish up with enduring issues, similar problems, challenges, situations, themes that societies repeatedly face over times and locations. I see natural rights, citizens' rights, law and government and the citizen, and gender inequality. Those are the biggest enduring issues that I see. All right, thanks for watching.